guys, welcome to Lab Science, the #1 podcast covering music production, audio engineering, music business, and songwriting. Today we have a very, very awesome episode. We're talking about synthesis, sound design using analog keyboards. We're going to be focusing on the Korg Minilogue, a very rare keyboard. I am Professor SentZ.
I'm Mr. Lean Automatic.
How are you today, sir?
Yo, I'm feeling like it's beer 30 right now.
Yeah, we've been drinking way too early. Speaking of which, I'm going to grab another beer. Modelo is our unofficial sponsor. By unofficial, I mean they haven't given us any of this for free, but we're alcoholics, so we bought it.
Modelo Especial.
So if you guys want to send us a case, that would be awesome. But today is going to be really fun. A lot of folks don't have this keyboard, so I'm really excited that we get to demo it for a lot of you for the first time. We're going to be talking about synthesis, specifically designing your own sounds from scratch, why they're important, what all those weird terms really mean. And I think this keyboard's kind of perfect for that.
Definitely.
You know, it's a pretty straightforward approach once you get to know it. It's a little bit weird at first. But I do find that when you spend some time with it, it's really great to get a lot of different sounds out of. But before we go too deep on that, we're going to introduce a new segment this week, and that's the Lab Report. We're going to talk a little bit about the crazy shit going on in music, because this has been a weird fucking week in New York.
I feel like musically, New York City's on fire right now.
You know,
and not like we're doing great. Like, shit's going down. I don't like it. Yeah, I don't like what's happening.
It's like on fire, abandoned ship.
Yeah, like a captain never leaves a ship, of course, but this shit is getting crazy.
It's getting out of fucking hand, dude.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like, you know, when it hits summertime in New York City, that shit happens.
Always. And, you know, it has a lot to do with the Puerto Rican Day Parade coming up. And I got my flag right here. I'm so ready. I'm ready.
I'm just worried about the day after the parade and finding you in one piece, hopefully.
In the gutter.
Oh, God, it's going to be bad. It's going to be great. Oh, man.
All right, so what's the rundown? New York has hit a shit fan.
I mean, where do you want to start? Should we talk about Troy?
Let's start there.
Should we get that out of the way?
Let's get Troy out the way.
So, this one hurts. Just because of the personal, not that I was a homie or a good friend of the dude, but just, I'm a Brooklyn dude. I've mixed a couple of Troy's records in the past as an engineer. You always want to see the local dudes win. And we always have this kind of stigma around Brooklyn rappers that goes sour at some point. For those that don't know, Troy Ave is a local Brooklyn MC who got caught up in a shooting in a New York club. He's currently in jail. He has been shot in the leg. There's a lot of allegations about whether or not he shot himself, whether he was shot. Long story short, a dude with a very promising future is now locked up for some bullshit in the club.
Whack, man.
And I think the only thing that I really want to say about the issue is most of us weren't in that club that night.
Not at all. I was there.
Neither was I. So I think before we have these expert analysis on what's going on and what happened in this and the third, we have to remember that this is a person's life. You know, his good friend was killed in this situation. This is another person's life that won't be returned.
Yeah.
And we're so desensitized that we often forget to just allow people their time to deal with some shit. So, you know, we need to let this one play out. But I think we really need to openly address this issue of violence in hip hop.
It's getting a little ridiculous.
Yeah. You know,
I feel like it's been kind of quiet for a while, honestly, with the clubs and everything.
I do too. But I do think we're very much in this transitional period, both in hip hop music and also just in hip hop culture.
Yeah.
We're in the end of this post crack era, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing too, is that, you know, the spectrum of hip hop right now is, it's not that people are soft or like, you know, their lives are not challenging in any way. It's just that the music generally is not like, you know, I'm gonna go back. It's not Wu-Tang, you know,
right,
banging on the track, like.
And I mean, it's
not like that anymore.
Most lives aren't that anymore.
No,
and you know,
not. People are on their cell phones.
Yeah,
instead of robbing people.
Absolutely,
for the most part.
And I think, you know, we have this, hip hop is the only genre where we have this tendency to maintain that expectation.
Yeah.
And it, you know, for the sake of these artists and these young men who are feeding other young men and women, for the sake of them to have a future, your bankroll freshes and such.
Yeah.
We owe it to them to have this open discussion about why we don't need to keep this philosophy going forward.
Doesn't need to happen.
So for every person who has a bit of input about, what happened that night, rather than waste your energy on something that you don't have any facts around, maybe take a couple of minutes and kind of think about how you can contribute to improving the situation.
Yeah.
I think that energy will be better spent that way.
Definitely. I want to talk about real quick what activity like this does for us as artists and as listeners at these venues in New York. Because where was this? Urban Plaza?
Yep.
All right, let's think about this. When we get to the venue, when SentZ and I get to a venue for a Black Space show, we don't usually get checked for anything. Not like we're doing anything ridiculous, but like, most circumstances, they're not going to strip us down and check out what we got going on, behind the hood and everything.
Right.
So they're not checking these artists when they get into the green rooms. They're getting weapons into the green room.
Right.
Now, I don't know how it happens. I'm not going to sit here and say, let's start checking everybody in the green room, because we all know got that chronic.
Yeah, we can't do that. I'm not coming out to a show if I can't get weed in the show.
Exactly. Like, we're smoking. You know what I'm saying? Like, we ain't here to hurt nobody. We're just trying to roll up.
Right.
But they're going to start looking at us like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
They're going to crack down on this as artists and as listeners.
Well, I think New York has always looked for an excuse to crack down on hip hop. I've been lucky enough to DJ for the Lacutuses and the DVSs and the Esquires, and my history with the shit goes back to the end of the weekdays back in Club Pyramid, where you had to go to the Lower East Side to that little one club because that was the only place that would let a hip hop show go down every week.
Yeah.
They're always looking for an excuse to get it out of the picture. So you don't want to leave the shit in the hands of those that want you gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's unfortunate, but we do have to move with a little bit of caution in this genre if we want the future of it to be preserved and for artists to get that opportunity to perform and actually make some fucking money.
We're out here trying to do something positive for the culture.
Yeah, man, definitely.
And a lot of people need to open their minds up a little bit.
Definitely. So on the subject of the culture and I guess the nightlife scene, I think we should probably talk about Santos Party House.
Huge hit.
I guess we should talk about this club week. You put me onto this more today. Maybe you want to intro this.
I'm trying to book a show at Black Bear, and apparently there were some promoters that booked a show that held a very specific point of view in a very negative way, and the owners of that club didn't like that, and from that point on, to my knowledge, they shut down the actual venue in the club.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's what's going on right now, but when I tried to book a show there, the information that I got was like, don't play here. You don't want to play here. People are canceling. A few things went down where they got the wrong people involved, and it was kind of, offensive to certain culture.
Yeah.
So that got moved to Santos. At the same time, you've informed me that Santos, shut the doors.
Yeah, we Santos Party House is an iconic, in my opinion, club in the city. For the fringe hip hop scenes, for the fringe electronic scenes, for the real shit. The pulse of this shit before it hit. And I recently saw online that they're closing up shop, and a lot of places in New York are closing up shop. Rent is fucking expensive.
It's crazy, man. They're killing us.
Yeah, it's getting to a point where if you have a venue, it's a labor of love kind of thing, and you're really doing it for the culture. And we're very appreciative of the venues that do that.
Absolutely.
But damn, it's getting sad out here.
It really is.
So many fucking great memories in that venue. And
yeah, man.
So much history and so much potential for Black Bear.
It's a platform. Yeah, that place was awesome. I'm not saying that's going to be closed moving forward. I don't know the exact extreme, how extreme the situation was.
Well, it just, it opens up the question of are we too politically correct when it comes down to the culture nowadays? it's an unfortunate situation that someone accidentally booked a show and didn't do the proper diligence to find out that the folks that are putting this show together may be, you know, an unseedy group or a hate group. Let's just call it that.
Hate group, yeah.
But it's very clear to everyone involved that wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think are we just being a little too, I don't know. I just think there's too much potential in a venue to have it be that tarnished by something that was clearly an accident.
We've just been crushed.
Yeah. You know, we're losing too many good spots already.
Been crushed in New York. That's why it's time to tour.
Yeah.
It's time to leave New York, hit the road. Come back like champions.
That's really the best advice you can have to a lot of artists in the tri-state area right now is just, if you have the opportunity to hit the road, do it, you know, and
get out there
and let the crazy cloud that's over the New York nightlife scene kind of pass.
Yeah. It'll come back around for sure.
It always does, man. This music shit works in cycles. All right, cool. So I guess this is a good time to talk about the Korg Minilogue. Rather than get too wordy, I'm just going to jump around the panel a little bit and play with the sounds and see what happens. So we'll start with one oscillator open. The Minilogue has 3 waveforms. There is a sawtooth.
All you dub heads out there.
Yeah, a lot of dub sounds, a lot of like really expressive pad sounds you can use, or bell sounds. It's also good for drums. Then we also have a sawtooth wave. Which is obviously great for those bell tones. Again, warmer pad sounds. And then finally, you've got your square wave.
This feels like future bass to me, you know.
Something to mention that you actually pointed out, there's no sine wave on the synth.
Not on any synth originally ever made.
So there's actually a trick to making a sine wave using the filter. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I just want to move around the panel a bit. So those are really basic waveforms, obviously out of the bat. But with wave shaping, you get a lot more expressive texture out of these waveforms. Wave shaping is a technique that turns our simple waveforms into complex ones by transforming the shape with modulation. Sounds that have passed through a wave shaper generally have a lot more energy in their higher frequencies, which gives them a richer sound. Again, let's go back to that sawtooth. If you start to add some shaping to it,
now you get some science going.
Again, that applied to the triangle wave. You go from here to on the square wave. Okay, so with wave shaping, you're basically applying modulation to those simple waveforms to get something more expressive. What's cool about the Minilogue is you can actually route things like envelopes and LFOs to the wave shape and really make that move around a little bit. All right. Now that was all with one VCO, one oscillator open. I'm going to open up the second oscillator and really stack these sounds.
Now we can get some distance.
Definitely. So you have those same waveforms, but now you have independent control, so you can stack them, you can have a combination of the two. And you have independent pitch control. Now, with these waveforms unsynced, basically each of those pitches are independent. If you switch sync on though, those pitches will lock and this becomes another wave shaper, so to speak.
Nice. It's almost like a more mid-range kind of band.
Yeah. It basically boosts the harmonics because the first oscillator is cutting the second oscillator, so it's quantizing it. It's keeping that pitch locked in a little bit. So one of the cool ways to add some more expression with these oscillators is cross modulation, and that's right in this the same oscillator section, where oscillator 1 starts to modulate or shake the pitch a bit of the second oscillator, and you get those weird formant sounds when doing that. So
this is really where you start to get your talk box,
yeah,
in that formant. It's a little more voicey, a little more like a vocal cord as opposed to a synth.
totally. And then the last kind of way to modify the signal here would be the ring mod. So you're basically multiplying and getting the sums added. All right, so right out of the bat, even before you go into the LFO, the envelope section, there's a lot of ways to change the texture.
Yeah.
But I think what really defines any synth is the filter.
Definitely.
So there's a built-in low-pass filter and the high-pass filter later on in the delay. But the low-pass filter is where you really get a lot of that fun formant sound. So let's just add that to the current texture. That's a fully closed filter. And we have keyboard tracking and pole tracking. So basically the filter opens up and closes based on how hard you're hitting and what pitch you're hitting on.
Velocity sensitive.
Exactly.
Oh, this would sound so good gated.
You can introduce some resonance.
Resonance basically means feeding back some of a filter's output to its input, so part of the signal gets run through the filter multiple times. Resonance tends to make the cutoff response sharper and also produces a response peak at the cutoff frequencies. Excessive resonance can cause the filter to break up into self-oscillation. That is, it produces an output tone near the cutoff frequency without any input applied.
Get the quality up.
The resonance also introduces a bit of a high pass. All right, so this is usually where I'd start to, personally, I'd start to mess with the LFO.
An LFO, or low frequency oscillator, is an electronic signal, usually below 20 Hz, that creates a rhythmic pulse or sweep. This modulation is often used to move something in a synthesizer so you don't have to touch a knob manually.
So right now I have that map to the cutoff of that filter. Let's introduce that.
So now we start getting some movement. Absolutely. Which is key in synthesis, in my opinion. Movement adds to your percussive element. If you can match the movement of your synthesizer with the percussion that you have going on in your track, you got some bodies moving.
Definitely. You know, if you can make rhythm out of the melody, you're serving two purposes. And you can sync that LFO to any MIDI. So you can sync that to your host tempo if you're using Ableton or the built-in sequencer too, which is nice. So you can also send that LFO to the wave shapes that we were talking about before, which gets you those formant tones.
I've seen your leader take me to your queen.
If you add that on mono mode, and then again add that sub we talked about before, can also change the wave shape. So this is that square LFO.
Hell yeah.
Okay, and then you can also steer that LFO to your pitch.
Yo, I think we're really exploiting some of the Korg elements right now. Like, they should be hollering at us because a lot of people don't even know how to make these sounds right now. Like,
I love Korg because they bring a lot of good sound design tools to a good price point.
definitely.
I fuck with Korg for that reason, for sure. But yeah, you can also send that LFO to pitch. So, and again, when you talk about that poly,
It's like rat-a-tat.
so yeah, a lot of movement out of the bat off of the built-in LFO. Something that I really appreciated later on when I really got comfortable with this synth, they added a second envelope that you can assign to things like the LFO rate, the LFO intensity. You can also assign it to the pitch of the oscillators. So basically you have another ADSR section that you can send
Just
to
for
other,
your LFO.
yeah, for your LFO or for your pitch. It's just,
yeah.
it's another set of hands.
Exactly.
So let's introduce that to the LFO to get some more movement first. We'll go back to cutoff.
You know, what's interesting is you almost get this arpeggiated feeling just from your LFO. And we haven't even gotten to the arpeggiator yet.
You can also use this to offset the intensity of the LFO. So if you don't want the LFO to kick in at first, kind of glides in a bit.
Give it that late attack. This will help you keep the melody of some of these instruments, because I think that sometimes the LFO can be a little intense when it's just rocking the whole time.
Definitely.
So having that attack knocked back a little bit is a great way to, you know, savor your melody.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit more about this envelope. I'm actually going to take the LFO off so we can focus our ears a little bit more on a pure sound. So let's get rid of that. And now I'm going to assign that second envelope to this pitch section, and this is going to send the envelope back to the oscillators to move those around. It's great for sound effects. So,
Meanwhile, in the corridor of Black Space Intrepid, so good.
so fun.
And the best part is you can control like the dissonance of that chord, you know, the off key. You can control kind of sweeps in and out of key.
Yeah. I think it's, you get into those really fun moments where you're, you know, part of the oscillators are playing in sync and then part of them aren't.
Yeah, and this is all hands on.
Yeah. I mean, we're just kind of,
This is all hands on.
kind of just wing it.
Yeah, hands on the dash, baby.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I think you really start to hear that pitch filter kick in when you go lower on the cutoff. So, and then raise that resonance.
Definitely. Woo! Great for intros into the body of your work.
You can also, I'm just gonna get rid of that pitch envelope just to focus the sound again. You can also send that second envelope to the filter. So if you want to design weird filter sounds. So again, like going back to just being able to get to a lot of different soundscapes I mean, for sound design, for ambient work.
It's crazy. And it's important to notice the workflow.
Yeah.
Like, how quickly do we just go from one point to another?
Yeah.
Just by going across the dashboard of this instrument.
Totally. So I guess, we've kind of covered the basic shaping tools. A couple of things that are unique to the synth that I think are really cool. One is the noise envelope. That's not unique to synths, but at this price point, it kind of is.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take the other oscillators out completely. You have this
straight noise.
This envelope that's just noise.
Put an LFO on it. But can you put an LFO on it? Ah, yeah. Yo, cut it so it's all LFO. There we go. That's hot. That's just hot. And that's not, there's no oscillators on right now, right?
No oscillators at all.
Straight noise. It's amazing what you can do with just a whisper.
A noise oscillator is often used to make a hi-hat sound. Start with purely noise and start to play with the envelope settings. Lower the release to about 11 o'clock and the decay to about 11 o'clock. And then add some resonance to the filter. Now the decay sound can alternate between a closed hi-hat and an open one. Compression and EQ can finish up that sound.
So another kind of neat trick that involves no oscillators. I'm going to turn all of the oscillators down and just play with the filter. And when you do that, if you crank the resonance up, you get somewhat of a sine wave. Exactly. So I'm going to crank the filter all the way up.
Going back to the fact that there is no sine wave filter on either of these oscillators, you have to make this yourself. You can really get some good sub going without even using any oscillation.
So this sound isn't using any of the oscillators at all. It's pure resonance coming out of the filter. And that's really important because it keeps the price point on the synthesizer down.
It's one less notch on the board, baby.
It's one less oscillator we have to make to get that sine wave sound. Very, very smart on Korg's part. All right, so again, that's some of the more independent features. One other thing I wanted to go over is the voice modes. I'm going to load up some of the built-in sounds just to give our users a chance to hear the presets made.
Tight.
Okay, so this is in poly mode. Okay, you get that 4-voice poly. And in poly mode, if you change the voice mod depth, you get an inversion of that chord without moving your hand. So you can turn a knob and kind of get different inversions on the chord. That's really handy if you don't play keys. But in duo mode, you kind of have that, and you get these stacked oscillators that are just a bit stronger.
This is basically oscillator signal flow. This is one oscillator going into another. Which one is going into the next one? Is the first one going into the second? Are they playing together? Are they playing independently?
Right.
This is what's happening here.
Right. So that first mode that we talked about, poly, has that independent 4-note poly. In this duo mode, we have those stacked to 2 notes, and that makes a kind of bigger, wider sound. And again, if you add that mod depth, you get detune. Okay, you have a unison mode.
That is wonderful. Open her up. Open up the filter here.
And that unison mode is, again, a stacking of those oscillators. That's where you get real raw power out of your analog synth. So, you know, as much as we like playing with that poly, these other voice modes are fat. That's where you get your bass. Okay, speaking of fat, we'll go to the mono mode, which adds that sub bass.
Let's see how low this thing can go. Now, those things are still cutting through, man. I've got on Audio Technicas, and that's super low. What octave is that? How many down?
That's all the way down on the keyboard.
See, that's still cutting through, man. You don't get that kind of tone in some of these digital, you know, plugins or instruments that come stock. Sometimes you just can't get that low range like that.
Definitely. So this next mode is actually one of my favorites as a non-keyboard player, is chord mode. And basically, you can set your chord type and hit one key and it'll play that chord instead of just that key. So
That's awesome.
these are all different chords.
Oh, man, that's dope. That's that house, baby.
Yeah, I mean, for playing and jamming and just getting ideas recorded, that, in my opinion, is the best inclusion. And there's, I don't know, a good 15, 16 different chord voicings, even some of the jazzier ones.
I can hear Dilla fucking with some shit like this.
Again, that range, you know, you can go from the house shit to the jazzy
We're killing
hip-hop
genres,
shit.
yo, on this Korg Minilogue right now.
It's a really good one at this price point. Now, the next mode is actually kind of interesting. It's delay mode, and basically it makes a hardware delay. So if you hit a note, it plays it again and again, but at a lower, you know, pitch. So I'm only tapping these notes, but it's repeating them multiple times like a delay.
This is also a great way to give yourself time if you're not such an amazing keyboard player.
Absolutely.
You know, you can hang around one note, two notes at a time. Also, you know, what is this, 37 keys?
Yeah.
There's not that many keys to play with in the first place. So this is really about the synthesis of your sound as opposed to being, you know, the most amazing pianist.
Definitely. And you know, one good way to get divisions, we have this hardware delay going on, but we also actually have a hardware delay or a digital delay.
Yes.
So you can set that to a different time division.
Yo, we're gonna have to start writing some shit. This is getting it's too good. Too much good happening.
So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of chatter about the sound of the delay when this thing first came out, and people said it was really dirty, but I think it's dirty in a good
dope,
way.
Yeah.
You know, the 201 was dirty, and you saw what that did to dub music.
I think the key also is to, you know, be constantly automating these parameters.
Definitely.
You know, they're knobs for a reason. Turn them.
Definitely. And
Don't just sit there and watch it go. Like, you know, get your hands off the keys, get your face out the laptop or whatever, and start, you know, getting some sounds going.
That's a good point. There's a built-in sequencer with, you know, motion recording. So
Yeah.
all of these things that we're moving, you can record in real time and have them sweep.
Yeah.
And that's important. You get those sweeps.
That's crazy important. So that's basically your hold key there.
Yeah.
That's tight.
So speaking of the hold key related features, we should move on to the ARP.
Can you knock back the attack a little bit? Knock back the sub a little bit. I just like to show how you can use an ARP to create this like melty kind of. It's not even arpeggiating anymore. It just becomes this kind of melty like atmosphere.
Especially if you introduce that delay again, like we were discussing.
Yeah, delay, increase the release a little bit. Let's really like wave this out. Yeah. And at any second, you can go right back to that ARP.
And you notice if you keep cranking that feedback, you get that distortion coming in. You know, you can really make those swells and nasty sounds.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the unique layout and what's individual to the synth. I'm finding it really, really fun to load in and just record raw sounds to sample.
Yeah.
So I think, I would encourage users to try that opportunity out. One thing that we're not going to get into with an audio sample today, but I do want to talk about, there's an audio in that allows you to patch in another synthesizer and send notes via MIDI to that synthesizer. So every time you hit a note on your Minilogue, it fires off a note from that synth too. You basically stack your sounds. And that also goes into the filter, so you can cut that off too. All right. So I think we covered a shit ton about the Korg Minilogue today. How do you feel, brother? Any questions?
I feel like we need to play this damn thing.
I agree. I think we're going to cut it off here, folks, and get to some music. Once again, thank you so much for listening to Lab Science, the #1 podcast covering music production, songwriting, sampling, synthesis, gangsta shit, pimping, tricking, pump out shit. We out. We love y'all. Peace.
Brooklyn.